All right, we have a special episode today. We are joined by the illustrious Paul Bleau and Jim DiEugenio, whom we've talked about both of you multiple times. It's kind of hard to not bring up one name or the other. Paul is very famous for Fair Play with Cuba. Jim has done a ton of work with Oliver Stone, including Destiny to be Betrayed.
Well, let me read their bios, Eric. That might help.
Okay,
straight up from the book. Yeah, because I mean, it's a long, rambling thing. So the bio that they wrote might be good. Paul holds an MBA from McGill University, Montreal, Canada, with over 25 years of experience as a strategic planner on national accounts. Paul eventually took ownership of and presided on Bleau Marketing and Communications. He co-founded Harmonia 2006, which has grown to become a leading commemorative services provider in the Quebec market. Paul also sat on many boards. He's now in his 18th year as a teacher at P.W. Sims Business Program, Champlain St. Lawrence College, presently a COPPA member. He has a long track record of research and writing about the JFK assassination, which includes appearing in Oliver Stone's documentary right here, which also features Jim. That's RFK Revisited, the Blu-ray edition, which I highly recommend. JFK Revisited through the Looking Glass. JFK through the Looking Glass, writing numerous articles for Kennedy's and King.com, which is Jim's website, and speaking regularly as a guest on Black Op Radio and other podcasts, as does Jim. James, do you... What's that?
That was Paul. That wasn't me.
No, but I'm saying you speak on Black Op also.
Oh, okay.
Right? That's all I'm saying. Right? You're on Black Op, right? A lot, right?
Yeah, both of us are, I think.
Right. Okay. That's all I'm saying. Yeah. James DiEugenio has an MA in history from California State University, Northridge. Happy anniversary of the Northridge earthquake, Jim, by the way.
Thanks for being so thoughtful.
Yeah. Might as well put that plug in. He's a retired teacher who has written and co-edited 4 books on the assassinations of the 60s, Destiny Betrayed, The Assassinations, Destiny Betrayed. This is the preferred version, right, Jim?
Yes.
Right, because I have every book you've ever written. I've got, obviously, this is The Assassinations right here,
Yes.
which I highly recommend, but not this book, Destiny Betrayed.
No, you might as well throw that in the trash.
I'm going to throw that in the trash can. And also one of my favorites, which is Reclaiming Parkland,
Right.
which dismantles a obscure guy named Vincent Bugliosi.
Right.
Highly recommend this book, and also Chaos by Tom O'Neill that really dismantles Bugliosi. And this is the book of the DVD.
Yes.
Right, which is also great. James DiEugenio with the intro by Oliver Stone. Highly recommended book regarding this DVD that I mentioned. He has lectured. Jim has written screenplays for both of those films, JFK Revisited through the Looking Glass and JFK Destiny Betrayed. He has lectured widely and made many appearances on many broadcast programs about the subject. He's an editor and publisher of the online journal, which I just mentioned, Kennedy's and King.com, which I highly recommend, which features tons of incredible articles, news stories, and critiques of works about the 4 major assassinations of the 60s, JFK, Malcolm X, MLK, and RFK. That being said, the new book that they're both involved in is called JFK Assassination Chokeholds, that inescapably proved there was a conspiracy. This is a book we're going to be talking about today. I highly recommend this book. It's got documents inside of it. And Paul's got a number of articles, as does Jim in here, about $3.99, which we'll get into. Welcome, gentlemen.
Nice to be here.
Thank you. All right, Eric, where do we want to start this love fest?
Let's just go from the beginning, because I know that they were not the only authors of this book. So they may be speaking for the other co-authors, and I'm not sure whom did what. But let's just go with the Warren Commission, Chapter 1. The official
Paul,
record,
is this your chapter, Paul? The first one?
Well, we collaborated on, a lot of us on many chapters, but the first one, first chapter really is what is the official record, right? And
Good place to start.
we started with that chapter because we wanted to establish from the get-go that the authors and people that do research are not that far away from what the official record is. Now, let me explain is that if you read a history book, and the first thing I did about 10 years ago for Jim was write an article on how history books cover or relate the JFK assassination. And they almost all will say that it was carried out by a lone nut and that you can, base this on the Warren Commission report. Then I questioned those authors, and they seemed oblivious to the fact that, I'm talking about 20 books here, 21 books, the most popular books used in high schools and colleges. And they were oblivious to the fact that there were at least 6 investigations in all. 6 official government investigations. There was a civil trial, there were mock trials, there was some investigations by foreign governments. So what they did is they really broke the code of conduct of the American Historical Association by relying strictly on something that was, that was impeached by the next one. So what that chapter does, Mark, is it shows what the actual reports say, and there's at least 90 references to insiders. And what do I mean by insiders? I'm talking about lawyers, commissioners, counsel, doctors, people that were directly involved in investigations. And when you read and look at what's written in the reports, what you're hearing from what I call these fake experts that show up on television every now and then is something that is completely opposite to what the official record really is. And that, I think what it does is it turns the tables. What did Bugliosi say? I was watching, the book on reclaiming Parkland. What does Bugliosi do? He calls us, a bunch of quacks, and there are quacks in the community.
Absolutely.
But if you look at the serious researchers, they're very close to what people like Richard Schweiker, Tannenbaum, have to say. So, and an awful lot, and that starts, I think, the book off. And anybody who reads that chapter, I think, should have the impression that, hey, you know what? These guys aren't QAnon types. Who are the QAnon types? So anyway, that was the idea of the first chapter. And as I say, there are 90 insiders, but there's at least another 30 or 40 more that aren't in there. And I'm discovering some all the time.
So these 10 chokeholds, there are 10 chapters. You're saying these make the argument irrefutable as an anti-Warren Commission document?
Oh, Mark, I'll go even further than that. Every single chapter makes it irrefutable.
Separately, by itself.
Separately. So it's not all 10. If you take one, okay, and you read it and you say, well, because, for instance, we have proof of a front shot. That's one chapter.
Right, exactly.
And if you accept that, then you have no choice but to conclude that there was a conspiracy. We have another chapter that is on how Oswald was impersonated at least 17 times.
Right.
At least 17. I think there's 3 cases that we didn't put in there. So it would be up to 20.
Right.
Jim wrote about, the evidentiary mess of the 20th century. He wrote about CE 399. And, if you take all that and every single one of them, you'll read and say, okay, maybe you're going to argue one of the chapters and not feel 100% comfortable about it. But any one of the 10 chokeholds would, proves to a high degree. What's the level, Jim, that we refer to in the book? It's to clear and convincing evidence.
Clear and convincing evidence.
Evidence that there's a conspiracy.
And one of the things that in that chapter, Paul wrote a lot of it, but Andrew Eiler, an attorney up there in Canada, I think he lives in Hamilton, all right, he added in a very cogent part of it, which discusses standard of proof. Okay. And the 3 tiers, which I think most people know, there's by preponderance of the evidence, the clear and convincing standard, which is higher, and then the highest one, which is beyond a reasonable doubt to a moral certainty. And that's the one that we should be concerned with, because this was a homicide case. So you'd have had to prove Oswald, guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. And Andrew unearthed something that I thought was very interesting, that standard beyond a reasonable doubt to a moral certainty originated because they did not want to have the community bear the burden of convicting an innocent man. Now, when I read that, I said, wow, could you get any more perfect for the Kennedy assassination? The whole idea that they convicted an innocent man, and now, instead of a community consciousness of guilt, there's a national consciousness of guilt. And now another thing that we talked about, which I think is very interesting, and which is relatively recent, is that the Warren Commission was not a majority report. Okay. You had Richard Russell, Hale Boggs, John Sherman Cooper, and as we showed in Oliver Stone's film, and we have new evidence now by a guy named Morris Wolf.
Yeah. Who is Morris Wolf? I meant to ask you that.
Morris Wolf works for Bobby Kennedy.
Okay.
And he helped fashion the Civil Rights Act, I think Title II. All right. And then when JFK was assassinated, Bobby Kennedy said, I think you should go work for my friend John Sherman Cooper.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And so he was detailed then to John Sherman Cooper. And he was with him when Cooper served on the Warren Commission. And in his book, Lucky Conversations, by the way, I met this guy by accident. I was at the Sarawak conference, in Pittsburgh in November. And I met him at the bar, the hotel, with Andrew Krieg. And Andrew Krieg said, you ought to read his book, Jim. There's a very interesting chapter about the Warren Commission.
What's the book? So our people at home know what you're talking about.
It's called Lucky Conversations
by Morris Wolf. Okay.
There you go. Lucky
Gotcha.
Conversations. I'm actually selling somebody else's book.
Okay.
Right?
Well,
I'm building a library here.
So he, in this book and in his conversations with me, and we did an interview with on Block App Radio. He said that Cooper was not just disagreeing; he was disgusted by the way that the Warren Commission was playing out, and he said, and it's in the book, Jerry Ford didn't believe it. So now you have 2 sources about Jerry Ford, because in the film we had Valerie Giscard d'Estaing. And now we have this source, Morris Wolf, through John Sherman Cooper, saying that the Warren Commission was essentially a minority report. Now, there's also something else that's in the book that came out recently. Edward Epstein just passed away a couple weeks ago. All right. But I think everybody listening to this show,
explain who Edward Epstein is, because I know.
I'm going to do right now.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Edward Epstein wrote a trilogy of books on the JFK case. All right. The first book, I think, was 1966. That was called Inquest, which was an important book on the beginning of the protest movement against the Warren Commission report. Then he wrote Counterplot, which was a critique of Jim Garrison, which I believe is 1968. Then he wrote something called, and this was during the 1970s, Legend. And,
Legend, yeah.
And this was a very long book that was sponsored by Reader's Digest, in which he had a huge budget and he hired a whole fleet of researchers. But in his book, Assume Nothing, which was the last book he published before he passed away, which I believe was last year in 2023. He wrote it. He revealed something that he never revealed in those 800 pages of literature. He said words of the effect about Arlen Specter. Said, how did you sell the Warren Commission on a single bullet theory? And he said words to the effect that, well, I said it's either that or you have to look for a second assassin.
That's a good line.
God, all right. This is a prosecutor. This is a standard of evidence. We either have to accept a single bullet theory or we have to look for a second assassin. And he knew they didn't want to do that. Okay.
I should ask you something. Recently, I read that Arlen Specter was told by other members of the commission, you basically, to paraphrase, you've got to make this work. And it wasn't his aggressiveness that did this. This was pressure from forces like Dulles within the commission that he had to make this work, Specter.
Well, I've never read that. If you have a source for that, I'd like.
I do. I don't have it off the top of my head, but I'll find that.
I'd like to see it. But
okay.
But see, Specter was the guy responsible for a lot of the forensic side of the investigation. All right. And so it would make sense that he would come to the conclusion about the so-called, whatever you want to call it, the magic bullet, single bullet theory. Dale Myers calls it the single bullet fact. Okay. So that when I read that, and we decided to put that in the book, because I think that's very, very interesting as a so-called standard of proof or a standard of evidence. And what Andrew wrote about here in that opening chapter, and he talked to Bob Tannenbaum about this also.
Yeah, I saw that.
Bob Tannenbaum is a very experienced homicide prosecutor from New York City. Yeah. All right. In 7 years, he never lost a case. All right. And he said, look, if you take a look at the House Select Committee and if you take a look at the Warren Commission, there is no standard of proof. No. None. Okay. And in a homicide investigation, you have to have that. You have to have integrity, as part of the investigation. But there was none in either one of those inquiries. So Andrew, who's a very good lawyer, I'm very glad he added that in there. And he also, him and Mark, another thing I really liked about the book is that it's the first book, and I'm sure you guys are aware of this, that details how Biden and Trump both subverted the JFK Act. Okay. Now, the JFK Act is of course, in case any of your listeners don't know this, is as a result of Oliver Stone's movie back in 1991, there were hearings held in Congress because the very last title card of that film says words of the effect that the files of the last investigation of the JFK case, the House Select Committee, are sealed until, I believe it was 2029.
29, yeah.
Yeah, okay, yeah. And this shocked people because they didn't know this. Most of the public wasn't aware of this. And so they bombarded Congress with, telexes, telegrams, faxes, et cetera, letters. And so they had to hold hearings as a result of this knowledge. And Oliver was there, and Blakey was there, and there were several other luminaries who were witnesses there. And so they passed this act, which set up a citizen. And this is what's so important. This was unprecedented. Okay. They set up a citizens panel. And what's so important about this, and I'm glad we got Tunheim to talk about it in the film, is that, see, in what they call a Freedom of Information Act lawsuit, the burden of proof is on the plaintiff. Okay. Sight unseen, not seeing the document, he has to show the court why it's important for that document to be declassified in toto, without what they call redactions, that is blackouts. What the ARB did, they reversed this. Okay. The burden of proof now was on the FBI or the CIA or the State Department, etc., to prove why we should not declassify it. You show us a good reason why we should not declassify it. And Tunheim had this really, he told me a couple very good stories.
Explain who Tunheim is to the people.
Tunheim was the chair of the ARB. Okay, he's a judge up in Minnesota.
Right.
He said that when the FBI came in, okay, and they put a document on the screen, okay, and Tunheim told them, now look, unless you come up with a bulletproof excuse, we are going to declassify this thing. And the FBI representative turns to the FBI lawyer who came in with him, and he says, can they really do that? And the lawyer goes, yeah, they can. All right. See, this is how the tables were turned with the ARB. That's why it was so important. And so now everything was supposed to be out. Now remember, this is 2024. Everything was supposed to be out in 2017.
Right.
And it says there, right in the JFK Act, that no matter what the excuse is, everything has to be released by 2017. Well, here we are, gentlemen, in 2024, and there's still 4,000 documents that have not been declassified. This is the arrogance of these guys, okay?
When we last left off, Eric and I were at COPPA, and some of the people there at the end were calling for a pressure on Biden. This was not this year, last year's COPPA in Dallas.
22.
When Paul was there, right?
Yes, 2022.
Oh, you were there too, both of you.
I was there. Yeah.
And there was a cry at the end to call Biden and put pressure on him among the members. Did that lead to the lawsuit you're referring to?
No, actually, that was filed before that.
Right. Okay.
That was filed before that. But I'm really glad you brought that up.
Yeah.
Because because what happened is, and Andrew discusses this in the book, is that what Biden did, he went a step beyond Trump. Okay. I mean, Trump did a delaying action. Okay. He delayed the release of these documents first for 6 months, then for 3 years.
Pompeo got to him on that. Yep.
And actually, by the way, when he did it for 3 years, that extended into the next term, which I'm assuming he thought he was going to win. All right. And so what happened is when Biden came in, he did something that is really, I don't know how to describe this. He completely subverted the intent of the ARB Act, and he more or less went back to FOIA. In other words, you set up this panel, okay, and these guys can now make claims. The FBI or the CIA can make claims to this panel that he set up, knowing that unlike ARB, these guys don't have the power, okay, to force declassification like the ARB did. And this is, by the way, and in a very Orwellian note, Biden called this his transparency plan.
What?
That's what he called it.
No. I don't remember.
Yeah.
Was that the
yes.
the first?
Oh, yes.
Oh, my. I didn't hear that.
Yeah.
He essentially said, screw you, I've given enough. And you know what?
Well, I don't want to give the camera the finger. Okay. But that's
Okay. So where is this lawsuit in Northern California?
Well, this was, if I remember correctly, this was filed like in 2021.
Okay.
Okay. All right. And it's going on now. You know the way lawsuits work. Okay.
Sure.
It's been going on now for like 2 years. All right. And the Judge Seaborg, just came in with a decision a couple days ago. All right. And most of the claims, I think there were 7 claims, 4 were denied. Okay. And only 3 were allowed to go through. And so they'll proceed to trial, hopefully.
Now, when you say they, you're talking about the Mary Farrell Foundation, represented by these two, Bill Simpic and
Larry Schnapp.
Larry Schnapp. Okay. Yeah.
Right. Okay. All right. And so that's where we're at now.
Wow.
So the book we published, JFK Chokeholds, and by the way, and Paul properly gives credit to that title to the legendary, the non-pareil researcher over in England, Malcolm Blunt, okay, who, in my opinion, I think he's semi-retired now. In my opinion, he was the #1 JFK researcher for about the last 10 years.
In England, or you're saying in the world?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Okay. All right.
He was that good. This guy lives in England.
Yeah.
But he would travel over to the United States 2 or 3 times a year.
Wow.
And he would spend days at either the JFK Library or the National Archives. And I owe a lot of the articles that I wrote for Kennedy's and King to Malcolm, because he would send me these big packages full of documents.
Wow.
Jim, this is on Betsy Wolfe. And Betsy Wolfe, who I hope we talk about.
Yeah, Betsy Wolfe figures a lot in the book. She is a researcher for the Assassinations Committee, correct? Or
HSCA.
Yes.
Right. Okay. So the House Assassinations Committee.
Paul, why don't you talk about her right now?
Yeah, Paul, let's talk about, because there's very few women involved in this. And, Oliver talked about the Laurie Metcalf actress character that he created as a homage in the Garrison case to women researchers in the JFK community, that the Laurie Metcalf character was a creation. So maybe we should spend some time on Betsy for a minute.
Well, Betsy Wolfe was a staffer for the House Select Committee on Assassinations, and she was tasked with trying to figure out how the CIA filing, worked, especially for defectors.
Right.
And she could not figure out how they were handling Oswald's file at the HSC. For one thing, normally, if you defect, and there were articles about his defection, and it was quite known, there should have been from the get-go a 201 file, which is a standard file. It's about as low in the pecking order as you can get. And, I got to apologize for that. Sorry. So Betsy Wolfe, she was going, and I think she was being stonewalled. And finally, she met some people. And sorry, I thought I turned this off, but I'm going to. There. So she finally got a hold of one of the top people. Jim, you'd remember the name, but it's someone who finally explained to her, here's how Oswald's file should have been handled. So basically, he's a defector, and when the filing would come in, it should have gone to the Soviet Russia division file and the information, but it was stopped. And it was stopped, and it went instead to the security division. The security division, and this is what makes John Newman pretty convinced that Oswald was set.
Let's just say who John Newman is, the CIA and JFK and his books that he's put out. Professor John Newman, I think, is who you're talking about.
Yeah, so I did a book review for Kennedy's and King on, uncovering Popov's mole.
Okay.
So the Americans were on just, they were convinced that Popov was given away by a mole, in the CIA. So what he is pretty convinced, and I have to say, I think I agree with what he has to say, is that Oswald was sent as a marked card to Russia. Okay, and he was dangled, and he was an interesting dangle because he worked at Atsugi as a radar operator on the U-2 base.
That's Atsugi, Japan, for people.
Atsugi, Japan, and the U-2 is, driving the Russians crazy because they were flying over Russia at such a high altitude they couldn't be taken out. So to have a radar operator all of a sudden appear in Russia and saying, I'm defecting and I'm willing to give away secrets, and so on and so forth, and then not to open up a 201 file, and then to not let the Soviet Russia division in on the information that's coming in and around Oswald. So the idea there was to see, well, who's going to be asking questions about Oswald? And the people who would be asking questions would be suspicious because They wanted to see, well, who is there a word coming from Russia to the mole to say, hey, you got to look into this. We want to know more about this Oswald type. So that's sort of and I'm really summarizing it.
Right.
So what Betsy Wolfe uncovered was that routing of Oswald's file. And the conclusion in there was that he wasn't a bona fide defector. And that's how important his work was. So
let me add this. The last witness that she interviewed was a guy named Gambino, Robert Gambino. Robert Gambino was the chief of security at that time in 1978. And so she confronted him with this paradox. She goes, look, this is what Oswald's file should have done, but this is what it did.
Mm-hmm.
How come? And Gambino told her, look, it doesn't matter how many documents come in or if they're pre-stamped or whatever. If the client had gone to the first gate, which is the Office of Mail Logistics, previously, the documents will go to that space in the CIA. In other words, what she discovered in late 1978 is somebody had rigged Oswald's file from the beginning.
From the beginning, yeah.
Yeah.
Now, Gambino is not related to, just so people at home, to the Gambino crime family in New York.
Of course not.
Okay, well, no, say of course not, because people will take that for a ride. I mean, we've got I discussed with you a couple of months ago the David Mamet film based on Giancana's
which
grandson,
I'm not looking forward to.
Okay. which has now become the Barry Levinson film about a woman author who may have interviewed Jack Ruby, Dorothy Kilgallen. This is more.
Oh my God!
This is morphed from the book by the Giancana grandson to a Barry Levinson film about.
So this is what that picture has now become.
Yeah,
it's done like 180-degree turn.
Yes, because they need to have a woman protagonist in modern film, so it's now become Dorothy Kilgallen's film, and
maybe Judith Mary Baker can make an appearance too,
and maybe Baker's involved. Who knows at this point? It's every woman for themselves.
But anyway, getting back to the point, this was a very, very important discovery. And I didn't know about it until Malcolm sent me the files, because here's something that's really astonishing.
Yeah,
as important as this is to the case, Betsy's memorandum, to my knowledge, were never typed up into official memorandum form by the House Select Committee. What I got from Malcolm was her handwritten notes on the research and all of her discoveries and all of her interviews.
Now, where were these? In the Smithsonian or National Archives?
No, those were at the National Archives.
Okay, all right.
Okay. And so when I discovered this, I was astonished.
Fascinating.
I said, my God, are you going to tell me this was not important enough to put in typed memorandum form and put in the House Select Committee volumes? But evidently that was the case. So in other words, until Malcolm discovered those documents, and until I wrote an article partially based on those documents, who had heard of Betsy Wolfe?
I hadn't. That's why I brought it up. I hadn't heard of her. And
no, that's an amazing thing. And you have to keep in mind, as a backdrop to this whole thing, is that Richard Schweiker famously said, for the Church Committee, that everywhere you look with Oswald, you find the fingerprints of intelligence.
Right.
And he's saying that. And, when you look at this, that is just one of the fingers. It's in a chapter called Oswald's Intelligence Connections.
That's chapter 2 in the book of Chokehold.
Yeah, that's just one, but it's a massive. And, you look at that alone, Mark, we talk about 10 chokehold chapters. Malcolm Blunt called that particular story a chokehold in itself.
Right.
When you think of it.
The beauty of the book is that it's in small chunks of information that is easily digestible. I read this book in a couple of hours, and it goes quickly because it's in small, this is for the people at home, bite-sized factual chunks that are easily read and easily digestible. But go on, Paul. I'm sorry.
Well, no, that you're bringing up a point that we were asking ourselves, how can we write this so that, the experienced researchers could digest it? And at the same time, that if you weren't so knowledgeable, that you could get enough out of there to say, hey, wait a minute, it's obvious this guy's no nut.
Right. In chapter 3, just Oswald being impersonated. Like you said, how many times was he impersonated, Paul?
Well, look, you pick your poison, right?
Yeah.
If he wasn't impersonated, then he's hanging around with people that he has no business being with. Okay.
Well, talk about the Hoover memo, specifically when Oswald is in Russia and he's being impersonated here, buying trucks and armaments or whatever the hell he was doing when clearly he was in Russia.
Yeah, there were cases of Oswald being impersonated while he was in Russia. You're right. And the thing is when you look at who or where the impersonations are taking place, well, in one case, it's in New Orleans, right? He's not being impersonated in, in Minnesota or not. It's in New Orleans, and it's for the benefit of who? It's that, what's the name of the, Jim, the free community, I'm trying to think, Free Cuba Committee or something along those lines, right?
The FRD.
Yeah, okay, but who were the chairpersons for that?
Yeah.
Guy Bannister.
Guy Bannister was one of the people.
One of them, and Gerald Tuhag, who Oswald worked for.
Tuhag.
Okay, so you have these two people that are involved in this scam, who later become targets of an investigation by Garrison. Well, they're already using his name in 1961, in some sort of purchase for vehicles to be, exported to Cuba or Cuba. I don't know the full extent of what they would have done, but I mean, that's kind of important.
Well, jump to chapter 5, because you'll talk about Jack Ruby running guns to Cuba in chapter 5, Paul, right? There's a little bit about the gun running.
Okay, so chapter 5 is about Ruby, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so Jack Ruby, what we wanted to show there is that, the description of Jack Ruby was that, out of pity or compassion for Jackie Kennedy, he acted on emotion and took out Oswald, right? He was a patriot. So I think we completely dismantle that.
Yeah. Oh, that's
I think we completely dismantle that aspect. We show clearly that this guy has, and not only do we show it, we use the words of the House Select Committee on Assassination.
Right.
So what did they conclude? They conclude that, you know what? He made all sorts of phone calls in the weeks leading up to the assassination that were with mafiosi. He had visitors in his jail cell. His first one was one of the top dogs in Dallas.
That's one of the Campisi brothers.
And then what did he try and do? They're pretty well convinced that, he did go to Cuba to try and spring Santos Trafficante. Right. For your listeners, who's Santos Trafficante? He's one of the people that the CIA partnered with to try and take out Castro
in Operation Mongoose.
He was one of the top operators in Cuba. He was running all the heroin that was transiting through Cuba to the United States. Okay, so now you've got Ruby, who visits Trafficante while he's in jail to try and spring him.
I think he visits him a couple of times, doesn't he, Paul? Or
more than once in a 10-day period, but he won't return. Then he, who did he ask for help to get to Cuba? And he asked a guy called Jack McKeon. Now, Jack McKeon was one of the number one gun runners who did some fatal time when it was okay, to export to Castro. So the McKeon story is amazing because shortly before the assassination, what does McKeon report? He reports that Oswald, with a Latino, showed up at his apartment trying to buy 4 Savage rifles. Okay, so what's he doing there? The whole plot was to say, hey, you know what? This guy who was a supplier to Castro is the guy who supplied Oswald with the kill weapon. That was the story that they were trying to set up there. Yeah. Except that McKeon didn't fall for it. He didn't sell the guns, and he asked him to leave. Now, what are the odds that you would have a McKeon that interacted with Oswald and interacted with Ruby?
Right.
In that way.
Wow. Jim, could we talk about getting back to the House Assassination Committee? Could we talk about the Lopez report for a couple of minutes? I don't think people realize what the Lopez report was.
All right. The Lopez report, well, actually, it shouldn't be titled that. It should be called the Lopez Hardway report.
Right, right.
Because it was really written by two guys, and Eddie got all the credit for it, but that's not really accurate. It was written by Eddie Lopez and Danny Hardway.
And these are two investigators.
Right. They were hired out of Cornell by Blakey, Robert Blakey, the second chief counsel. And they came down from Cornell. All right. And one of their assignments was to investigate Oswald in Mexico City. All right. And so if you read the Lopez report is, I believe, about 350 pages long. All right. And it was not part of the House Select Committee volumes. And I asked Eddie about this. Okay. I said, Eddie, why wasn't your report part of the House Select Committee volumes? It would have fit neatly into one of the appendixes.
Mm-hmm.
And he goes, Jim, when me, Danny, and Blakey went in to talk to the CIA about the report, there was us three on one side, and there was three of their guys on the other side. They objected something like 25 times to the first page of the report.
Right.
Okay. It took us all day to get through 3 pages.
Wow.
All right.
Wow.
And so Blakey, at the end of the day, after the 8 hours, he threw in the towel.
Right.
Okay. And so that's why it was not part of the House Select Committee volumes. That's how uptight the CIA was about letting that report out. Now, it did get declassified by the ARB in stages. All right. Now, because
there are different versions of it that have been released.
Because in the first stages, it wasn't completely declassified.
Right.
But by 1998, it was pretty much all there.
Okay.
Now, if you read the Lopez report, and if you compare that to what's in the Warren Commission about Mexico City, it's night and day.
Right. That's one of the greatest chokeholds of all time.
Right.
I've always said about Mexico City, all roads can be dismantled just by Mexico City. Go on, Jim.
And let me say this in relation to that. At the end of his investigation, Jim Garrison said, one of the problems I had is that I only had the New Orleans aspect of this plot.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I didn't have Dallas, I didn't have Washington, and I didn't have Mexico City.
Right.
All right. Okay. Because what Danny and Eddie concluded was, after a very extensive investigation, the CIA could not come up with one photograph of Oswald either going in or coming out of either embassy.
Well, you may want to discuss David Atlee Phillips at this point.
Yeah, well, we're going to get to that.
Get there, and Ann Goodpasture and her operation. Okay.
Either the Cuban or the Soviet embassy.
Right.
And then they also came to the conclusion that the voice on the tape was not Oswald's, because they bug these embassies. The United States bugs these embassies, and so they said, well, wait a minute. How come you could not come up with one picture when you should have had 10? Okay. And you can't come up with Oswald's voice on any tape. So they began to go ahead and investigate. And one of the people that they ran into was somebody that nobody knew about at that time, a woman named Ann Goodpasture. And they write extensively about Ann Goodpasture.
Yes.
In the Lopez report, whereas in fact nobody ever heard of her before.
Nobody ever heard of her.
Right.
Yeah.
And so they found out that Ann Goodpasture was, well, there's no other way to say this, that she was lying to them.
Yeah.
All right. She said that, well, I really didn't have access to any of the taping things or anything like that. Okay. So they found out from, I believe it was the second in command at Mexico City, that she said that. He goes, Ann Goodpasture was the first person to have access to the audio tape every day. Okay, no, that's not true at all. All right, okay, and then they found out, and this is what Eddie told me. Jim, Phillips was not in Mexico City a lot because he was always flying around.
This is David Atlee Phillips, the chief of Western Hemisphere CIA operations.
At that time, he was chief of Cuban operations out of Mexico City.
Right. Okay.
He Western Hemisphere later.
Okay. Yeah.
All right. See, Phillips was always flying around the JM Wave or the Langley.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
And JM Wave based out of Miami or?
Yeah, the Miami Super
Okay,
Station.
just for people at home. Yeah. Just
for
people at home. Yeah.
And so she took care of his operations
while he was gone.
Wasn't there.
Wow.
And I said, "Oh my God!" And you just discovered her in 1978. Okay, this is so. And so they found out that when they discovered that she was lying to them. Okay, and by the way, it wasn't just on that matter. It was also about the I'm sure you guys know about this, but maybe some of your audience doesn't. They sent up a picture of a guy that they tried to pass off as Oswald because they couldn't come up with a picture of him anywhere. So they sent up a guy who did not look anything like Oswald and was not, in fact, Oswald.
Well, let me just interject because we got some reports that particular guy played football with Malcolm Wallace in Fort Worth. Oh no! I've got
no. That's not true, Mark.
I've got reports.
In the Lopez report, they name him.
Right. Okay.
He's a guy named Maskalev.
Okay.
Who worked undercover.
Right.
As a under diplomatic cover was really a KGB agent.
What?
Okay. They named him in the Mexico City report.
Right.
All right. And so they tried to pass this off as Oswald.
Right.
Okay. And so Danny and Eddie investigated this. And they came to the conclusion that not only did Ann Goodpasture know who this guy was, but they came to the conclusion she knew who he was before she sent the picture up.
Right.
Okay. And this got mangled for 13 years until the House Select Committee straightened it up as to who this guy really was. But even worse than that, there's a chart in the Mexico City report, the Lopez Hardware report. All right. And not only that, but she knew he wasn't there when Oswald was there. And they proved this with charts. They were so disgusted with Ann Goodpasture.
Wow.
That they wrote up 2 bills of indictment, okay, to refer to the Justice Department. One for Phillips and one for her.
Wow.
That they should both be tried for perjury. Okay. All right. That's
this would have to go to Nicholas Katzenbach at that point, I imagine, right?
No, not at that time.
Okay.
Not 1978.
Right. Okay.
The thing that they nailed Phillips on was, there was a delay. And I really want to show how important this is.
Okay, go on.
See, one of the things in the Warren Commission was that somehow, some way, Oswald talked to Kostikov. Okay.
Explain who Kostikov is.
Okay, all right. Valery Kostikov was supposed to be head of Department 13 in the Western Hemisphere for the KGB. And this included black ops and liquid affairs, which means assassinations. Right.
Department 13 is their assassination bureau and black ops. Yeah.
Right. And so he was under diplomatic cover at the embassy in Mexico City at that time. And supposedly he talked to Oswald. Oh, here's the problem. Okay. The problem is that when the CIA found out about this, that should have been a hot cable sent straight to Langley. It didn't get there for 8 days. It didn't get there for 8 days. And I said to Eddie, I go, what's with this Kostakov cable? Well, Jim, you don't understand. They were using Pony Express. And so, and so, and so the excuse that Phillips came up with
Oh,
was that he had to write this thing, okay, and he was distracted by all these other things he was doing. Well, Danny and Eddie found out that that was a pile of manure because he wasn't even there at the time. At the time the cable went up. All right. And so this is why they wanted to indict both Goodpasture and Phillips.
Right. Oh, Phillips also. I didn't know that.
Yes.
Phillips, yeah.
Yes.
oh yeah.
All right. So this whole thing about Mexico City, one of the big problems is that of the people who said that he was in the Cuban embassy,
Mm-hmm.
4 out of the 5 said it wasn't him.
Right. Including
Okay.
Sylvia Duran,
Right.
as we
Yeah,
mentioned
because she
earlier.
said he was short and blonde.
Right.
Okay.
Well, they have him having an affair with Sylvia Duran. That's how far.
Well, that's how. By the way, when I asked Eddie about that,
Yeah.
the what's her name, Elena de Pazo de Gaz or whatever her
Yeah.
name
Yeah.
is.
Yeah.
Okay, and he said, Jim, I probably put too much of that in there. I shouldn't have believed everything she was telling me.
Right.
Okay, all right, and so they came to the conclusion that Oswald was not at either embassy. That he might have gone down there, but he did not go to either embassy, which leaves the question: how fast did the CIA put this BS story together?
Tell us the dates,
now,
because we're talking about September 28th, Jim,
the
not
late
October.
part of September.
Right. We're not talking about November or October.
No.
But Frank, if this all roads lead to Mexico City should be the name of your next book.
Yeah.
Because all roads do lead to Mexico City. And
Now you want to hear something else that Betsy Wolfe, and this really shocked me. Okay. In her notes, she came up with the discovery that on November the 23rd, one day after the assassination, Angleton had both Elena Garro de Paz and Sylvia Duran escorted to private hotels paid for by the CIA. Now, how in God's name could you know about Elena? You might be able to know about Duran on the 23rd, but how on earth could you possibly know about Elena at that time? But
let's just explain what happened to Duran for the audience at home. How?
Okay. Well, see, when the word got out that that she was the person who had the most interaction with Oswald while he was in Mexico City, because she was the receptionist at the Cuban embassy, and that's the place that Oswald went to most often. Okay.
Supposedly.
Yes. Well,
allegedly.
Yeah, that's
Allegedly.
He might not have even been there at all.
I don't believe he was, and you'll never convince me he was.
All right. That the CIA sent orders to the DFS to go ahead and pick up.
The DFS is the Mexican intelligence police, right?
Right. Yes. And so they sent orders to DFS to pick up Sylvia Duran. Okay. Because reportedly, even at that early stage, she was saying that this guy was short and blonde. Okay. Now, Oswald was not sure. He's about 5'9", he's about average, okay, and he's not blonde.
Right.
Okay. So the DFS, to put it mildly, did a very good job on Sylvia Duran.
When you say good job, maybe you can explain that.
She was intimidating. They were intimidating her, threatening her, and torturing her. I think one report said that they were putting out cigarettes in her hands.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. And so,
but this was at our direction, Jim.
Yes, correct.
That's the important part, which may, as we discussed before the show, I believe that's what's left in the documents that haven't been released. I believe there's Mexican stuff in there this.
According to Jeff Morley, if you want to hear something very interesting,
go ahead.
One of the documents that he was trying to find, which has not been declassified, is that in June or July of 1963, the CIA sent SI, which means special intelligence, to Joanides, while he was in New Orleans running the DRE.
Mhm.
And
This is George Joannides.
Yeah, should we explain who he is?
The white whale of Jefferson Morley of the Moby
George
Dick fame.
Joannides was a CIA officer who ran operations for the DRE, the Director of Student Espionage, in New Orleans in the summer of 1963. All right. And he lied about this to get on the House Select Committee. All right. And Blakey swallowed it. All right. And he was getting special intelligence in June, which is highly classified, in June and July of 1963 from Langley. And Jeff was trying to find out, what was this about? Okay. Was it his relations with the DRE? And I said, well, Jeff, what if it was about Mexico City? And he says, well, if that's the case, then it's case closed. All right. Joannides was somehow in on the plot. All right. All right. If he already knew that Oswald was going to go to Mexico City, or that was the story.
Yeah.
All right. So this is one of the things that he was trying to get out of the CIA, but he lost his lawsuit. Thanks to
you're talking about Morley now.
What?
You're talking about Jefferson Morley.
Yeah, he had to file a lawsuit.
I know that. I'm just saying
8 or 9 years.
Yeah.
And then Brett Kavanaugh screwed up his lawsuit, and then he went down and got confirmed by Congress as a Chief Justice. All right. So know what? Listen, nobody can summarize Mexico City.
That's why I'm saying that the book should be All Roads Lead to Mexico City. Everything's in Mexico City.
Yeah,
it cracks the case. It cracks the case wide open. I don't believe he was there. I think there were sightings of Oswald in Austin, Texas.
Yes, there was.
Thank you for saying that. People think I'm crazy. I've said this for years. And
Laura
also,
Cottrell.
Thank you. And he was trying to also see Connolly to get his Marine discharge.
Yes.
Thank you, Jim. I thought I was losing my mind there for a couple of years. Thank you. Okay, right. So let's get into briefly. I wanted to get into this because when you're publishing the book Chokeholds, you were going to press and you started to briefly cover the Paul Landis 399 story. Maybe you could talk about that a little bit between the publication of the book and today, if you have any take on the Paul Landis 399 discovery. You mentioned it might be the fifth bullet, Jim.
Well, I think it was. If you believe Landis,
go on.
Because in the film, in the long version of the film, there's two versions of the film. There's a 2-hour version, and that's
the film being which film?
Oliver Stone's JFK Revisited, and then there's the 4-hour version, which is called JFK Destiny Betrayed.
Which is what I recommend and what you recommend. I just want to be emphatic about this because it is very confusing to the general public. The 2-hour version was on Showtime.
Yes.
Okay. The 4-hour version was released by Shout and on Amazon initially. Okay. So go on.
Right. Okay. In the 4-hour version of the film, we have Dr. Randy Robertson talking about the recovery of a bullet. Okay. During the autopsy that night, by James Young, who was a doctor, who was an assistant to Berkeley. He had sent out 2 of his scrubs to go ahead and check out the car. Okay. And they came in with not just what he thought was going to be there, which was pieces of bone, but they also came in with a bullet slug. Okay. And Young didn't understand the importance of this. Okay. Until a long time later. And Randy Robertson found his correspondence to show you how naive this guy was. One of the people he talked to about this was Gerald Ford. Okay. Okay. Who, to put it mildly, wasn't interested. Okay.
Well, just for a second, I just wanted Paul to address which I've known for years, that Gerald Ford altered the autopsy sketches for the good of the American people, I believe, before he didn't he at one point say that, Jim, or Ford's explanation as to why he altered the shoulder shot and moved it to the back of the neck.
He called it clarity.
He called it clarity, but didn't he? And I could be making this up. I thought at one point he said it was for the good of the American people.
Oh, I don't remember that.
Oh, okay. I'm
No.
sorry.
But it can't be clarity because that bullet was not in Kennedy's neck.
No, it wasn't.
It wasn't in his neck. It was in his back.
Well, nothing does more damage than that move by Gerald Ford.
Right.
And it may be the quid pro quo for his political career. Mike, I don't think I'm off base with that idea.
One of the wonderful insider comments about Ford comes from Sullivan, who was number 3 in the FBI at the time, who wrote a book.
Sullivan, who went deer hunting and I think was a victim of
another weird death when he was, I think, about to testify for
wasn't he killed in by a teenager in an accidental deer hunting? Okay, I thought I made that.
Yeah, something like that. But you see,
this is a number 3 in command of the FBI. I'm sorry, go on, Paul.
Well, he said in his book that when Ford was, selected for the Warren Commission, that Hoover was ecstatic because the FBI had their guy.
Right. Okay, so getting back to, I just want to get back to Paul Landis and the discovery of that bullet, which they initially claimed was $3.99.
Remember, we're at 4 with Randy Robertson.
Right. So this is 5 now.
So this is now another
Sam Kinney.
All right.
We're going to get into Sam Kinney because Sam Kinney says the same thing 10 years previously.
Yeah.
I don't know. People don't know that, but Kinney said the same thing that Landis said. And I don't know if you understand who James Robinholt is, his deep state handler out of Chicago, who's been sewn to the hip of Paul Landis since this discovery has been made public. Robinholt, go ahead. Go ahead, Paul. Paul, go ahead.
I'll start it, but keep in mind that he spoke at Kappa and I was at Lancer, right? So, Jim, you might be able to fill in a few blanks.
Did you see him at Kappa, Jim?
Yes.
And was he with James Robinholt?
Once. The other time he was with he was questioned by Wecht.
Okay.
Right.
One
time he was questioned by his co-author. The second time he was questioned by Wecht.
And how did he do with the Wecht questioning?
Well,
in your opinion,
in my opinion, neither one of them really challenged him.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
And he essentially, the question that I would have asked, was how could this possibly be CE399 if you found it in the back of the car?
Okay, let's just explain what happened with him, because a lot of people don't understand what Landis's story is, Jimmy.
Look, the official story is that CE399 was found on Connolly's stretcher, at Parkland Hospital,
right,
by Tomlinson. Daryl Tomlinson. All right. And he brought it to Wright, who was a security officer. Now, if it's on Connolly's stretcher, that means it had to make it through, all the way through,
right,
all the way through Connolly's body, if you believe the Warren Commission, if that's the official story. But Landis says he found this bullet in the back of the car, in the back of the car.
On the top of the seat.
Yeah, right.
On the top of the seat cushion.
So the only way that makes sense is if it was one of these, what they call a short shot.
Yeah.
In other words, it didn't go through Kennedy's body. All right. And it somehow slithered out, and ended up in the back seat of the car.
I think we both believe this might have been the shot to the shoulder. If
right. The one that Connolly says was in the neck.
Right.
Okay. So
that Gerald Ford moved up to the neck. Yeah.
Well, excuse me. Ford moved up to the neck.
Yeah. Go on.
So if now that actually, the thing about that is that actually makes sense.
Yeah, I thought so. Yeah.
Because if you read the testimony taken by the House Select Committee of the people who were down there at Bethesda, they said we couldn't find an exit. Right. We did everything. We put metallic probes in. We put our fingers in. We just could not find an exit for this wound in the back.
Right. Which is not very deep.
Right. And that's exactly, I'm glad you added that in.
Yeah.
Because they said it didn't go very far.
Right. Possibly
Okay.
the half of a pinky length, if I
Yeah,
recall.
right. It
Right,
didn't
Paul?
go very far at
Oh
all.
yeah.
So in other words, that very might could have happened. That the bullet in the back was a short shot, okay, and it didn't go in very far, and it might have slipped out. All right. So that's a distinct possibility. All right. But that cannot be CE 399.
No.
And this is one of the problems I have, because I think that Landis is trying to say that it was, but it's simply an impossibility.
And then Kinney before him, potentially. That so troubles me that in years prior, another Secret Service agent with the same basic story.
Right.
Yeah,
do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, that's the point. What I noticed in the forums, Jim, do you recall this not too long ago? That someone said, hey, wait a minute, I'm finding primary documents of another Secret Service agent that referred to that bullet.
Sam Kinney now? Is that,
was it Sam Kinney? Yeah.
Yeah.
You think so?
He's talking about the Landis bullet, right?
Yeah. See, Vince Palomera.
I was just going to mention Vince. Yeah,
an expert on the Secret Service. He's written 2 or 3 books.
Been a guest on the show a number of times. Vince Palomera, who wrote Survivor's Guilt.
That's what he suspects.
Yeah.
He suspects that Landis got this story from Kinney. Okay.
Well, possibly, if just to back up, it might be James Robinault, who claims to have the same publisher as Paul Landis, who claims to have been brought in to ghostwrite the book to help reframe, according to Robinault, the memory of Paul Landis. To clarify the memories. He was brought in at an early stage of this book to help clarify the memories of Paul Landis. And it goes back to Sam Kinney, according to Vince Palomara.
Yeah, that's what Vince thinks.
Right. Okay.
Now,
what do you think? What do you think?
I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know one way or the other if it's a true story or not. Okay. But let me say this. Whatever you want to say about Paul Landis, at the 60th anniversary, which was about 2 months ago?
2 months ago, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
We didn't get lambasted like we did at the 50th.
No.
Okay.
Explain that because
on the 50th we got annihilated.
On what?
The other side dominated everything. You name it. Television.
Oh, right, correct.
Newspapers, magazines.
You're talking about the deep state, the mainstream media. When you say the other side, okay.
I mean, just look what happened in Dallas. They blocked off Dealey Plaza.
Right.
You had to submit your name to Homeland Security.
Right.
All right. And they had, of all people, David McCullough, all right, who did the speech. Whatever David McCullough did on John Kennedy, I'd like to know. But he was a guy that the Dallas police and the Dallas City Hall picked to go ahead and do the oration for there. And that was hooked up throughout the world. All right. Yeah. I know this for a fact because I watched it from a coffee shop in Dallas. Now, this time around, that didn't happen.
I know.
Okay. And this is because of partly because of Landis, partly because of Rob Reiner, and partly because of what the doctors saw, which was on Paramount Plus.
Don't forget Alec Baldwin spoke down there. I think.
Yeah, Alec Baldwin spoke at the Kappa conference.
At the Kappa conference, right?
In Pittsburgh. So this time out, we didn't get lambasted. We actually did fairly well, I think, this time around. All right. And one of the things, I did the chapter on CE 399.
Right, which I read last night. Great chapter. Fantastic, summing it all up. I mean, you also go into the chain of custody in the film, which is brilliant. One of the main thrusts of the Jim DiEugenio, Oliver Stone documentary that we're discussing, the 4-hour version. You go deeply, deeply into the weeds on the chain of custody and the violation of the chain of custody, I should say, on supposedly on 399, Jim.
Yeah, see, we had 3 people talking about that. We had Gary Aguilar, we had Brian Edwards, and we had Henry Lee. Henry Lee, I thought, was so effective.
Yes.
That little speech he gives about chain of custody.
Explain who Henry Lee is for people at home.
Henry Lee is a retired criminalist who I think he told Oliver he's worked on 8,000 cases in his
Right.
career.
Right.
And I think he said he did 1,000 homicides. All right. And
I think he might have invented blood splatter evidence.
maybe
The splattering of blood onto a wall and all that stuff.
He is so highly credentialed that he can testify in almost every state of the union and 42 foreign countries. He's written 30 books.
Wow.
He actually is the only criminalist I know who had a TV show devoted to him for 3 years. They did his most famous cases. Okay. And so through Cyril Wecht, we got him. I think we interviewed him in Dallas. All right. And I pre-interviewed him. He calls me up one afternoon. And to understand this story, you have to know a little bit about Los Angeles. I live in Burbank. He calls me up at 3:30 in the afternoon. And he says, Jim, can you come over and see me and give me some of the questions you're going to ask me for the movie? And I said, where are you? Malibu.
Yeah. Good luck. Good luck on that. Good luck on that field trip.
It took me almost 2 hours. Yeah, at 3:30 in the afternoon to drive from Burbank to Malibu. Okay. I said, this guy doesn't know LA at all. Okay. So I went out to interview him. Okay. And that little speech that he gives.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. In the movie, he gave it to me out
Word
at that
for word.
restaurant in Malibu.
Wow.
He goes, the crime scene doesn't start at the lab. It starts where the crime is committed. You have to maintain the integrity of evidence from there to the lab to the courtroom. Everything has to be signed and documented. All right. And if it's not, the judge will rule it inadmissible. All right. Now, the other thing he told me, which didn't make it into the movie, I didn't edit the movie. All right. I asked him about trajectory analysis.
Oh, yeah.
Because we've gotten so much of this over the years, Dale Meyer's magic show, okay, and that kind of thing. And I asked him about this because he is the number one reconstructionist in America. If you want to reconstruct a crime, this is the guy you talk to. He said, you can't do it in the JFK case. And I said, why not? And he says, because neither wound was dissected. Neither the back wound nor the head wound was dissected.
Nor the throat wound.
Yeah, well, that's supposed to be part of the back wound, if you believe.
Oh, I see. Right. Okay.
Okay.
Gotcha.
So he says, if a wound is not dissected, you cannot speak with any authority as to its trajectory. It's more or less guesswork. And I sat there and I said, I didn't think you were going to say that.
Wow.
Okay. But here he was. He's the number one reconstruction guy saying you. And by the way, that's actually true. Okay. Because the back wound, as turned out at the Clay Shaw trial.
Is that in the book, Jim? The book of the film?
Oh, yeah.
It's in here. It's in the book of the.
Yeah.
Okay. I just wanted to put this book up there for people at home.
Well, thank you so much.
Yeah.
I'll send you some of the royalties.
No, we're here to sell books, Bubby.
And that's true because the trial of Clay Shaw, they asked Pierre Fink.
Yeah.
Numerous times.
This is Colonel Fink, who's featured in the JFK film on the witness stand about who was running the autopsy.
Yeah. Why did you not dissect the back wound? And he wouldn't answer the question. And finally, the judge had to order him to answer the question.
It was Judge Haggerty, the smoking judge.
And he said, because there were certain people in the room who stopped him from dissecting the back wound. Okay. Now, so that's number one. Now, number two, as far as the brain examination goes, and Cyril Wecht, this was so terrific in the movie, said they did not dissect the brain. They did not section off the brain in order to preserve the specimen. And if you remember in the movie, Wecht goes, preserve the specimen for what? To put it in the National Archives so Jackie Kennedy can put it on her fireplace? Why would you want to preserve the specimen?
Well, let me ask something. Do you think that they took another brain with a rear shot in it to use for the autopsy?
Well, that's not me saying that. That's the experts we have.
Right.
Mike Chesser is a neurologist.
Yes.
Okay. He's down in Little Rock, Arkansas, and he makes the case that the brain we have in evidence is not JFK. Well, look, how can anybody argue that's JFK's brain?
I know, but I just the idea that they went and got a brain, which I always believed they did, but I didn't know specifically they got a brain with gunshot wounds in the back of the brain.
Well,
that's new to me. That's new.
It doesn't necessarily have to be that, because if you look at the drawings and the pictures of what is what is supposed to be JFK's brain, go ahead and try and find a bullet wound in that brain.
Right.
Okay.
Well, it also weighs more than
and it's now that's the most common sense argument.
Yeah.
How on earth can Kennedy's brain weigh 1,500 grams, which is 160 grams more than the average? How could it possibly weigh that much?
That's insane.
You see the Zapruder film, you see this head explosion, you look at the pictures in the back seat, you see this blood and tissue, you see Jackie Kennedy going out the back of the car to pick up part of his brain, which is on the trunk of and by the way, she got it, and she gave it to a doctor at Parkland Hospital.
Right.
All right. So how on earth can Kennedy's brain weigh more than the average?
Well, I'll switch to 399. How could 399 have less material in it than is in Connolly's leg? The same could be said for 399, Jimmy.
Right. Because what Mark's talking about here is the so-called bullet that went through both Kennedy and Conley and was supposedly found at Parkland Hospital, which if you look at it and if you weigh it, it looks like, and by the way, there's many arguments made about this. Henry Hurt in his book, Reasonable Doubt. It looks like it went through a bale of cotton.
Right.
Okay?
Well,
it doesn't look like it went through two.
I always believed it was a water tank, a police water tank.
Okay. Take another pick, water tank.
Yeah.
All right.
But the amount of material missing from it, go on.
Mass.
Yeah.
It's missing something like 4 grains or something like that,
And I mean, didn't Connolly's wife refuse to exhume the body at one point to check on the? Am I crazy, or did that happen?
Yeah, they would not exhume Connolly's body,
and they wanted to check the amount of shrapnel
if there was any metal in his body still left over.
Right. Well, there would be there, I presume, if it
didn't.
Yes,
there actually would be.
Right. Okay. Yeah. And she refused to allow the exhumation of the body at some point. Okay. Boy, my memory remembers that.
Yes. There was no official exhumation of Connolly, even though a lot of people wanted to do it. All right. But listen, both of those people, I mean, you don't even have to do that. Right. I mean, Conley emphatically denied that the same shot that went through Kennedy went through him, and so did his wife.
Right.
Okay. And in fact, Conley was even more clear about this years later in private. Okay. It's in Joe McBride's book, Into the Nightmare. I think a reporter named Doug Campbell interviewed Conley. He happened to be at this function with Conley. And he said, well, I might as well, here's my opportunity of a lifetime. Okay. Did you believe the Warren Commission? Yeah. And Conley said, quite frankly and honestly, he said, I didn't believe the Warren report for 5 seconds.
Interesting. Now, you and I discussed this the last time I interviewed you, I think.
Oh, did we?
No, not this, but what I'm going to say now. That the angle of the shot of Connolly had to come from a completely separate shot.
Yes.
Almost, remember we discussed this a little bit, straight down from the back, exiting the front of his chest, going straight down at almost an angle from the roof, I believe, of the Texas School Book Depository. I wanted to get your opinion on that.
The angles do not, and in fact, in Thompson's new book, Last Second in Dallas.
No, the new one, yeah.
Yeah,
that's Josiah Thompson, who wrote 6 Seconds in Dallas, one of the original investigation books.
Yeah, that's what he said when he went. One of the first things he did when he went down to Dallas, is that he tried to figure out how on earth could the angle through Kennedy equal the angles.
It can't, right? Yeah. It's got to be. That's what I was talking to you about 2 years ago. It's got to be something straight down separately, into Connolly's upper back, exiting almost at the level of his stomach, and
Yeah.
then straight down wrist and thigh, Jim. It's
Yeah.
it's
If
almost
you
a
take a
90.
look at the exit
Yeah.
in Connolly's jacket,
Right.
all right, you'll
I thought I
see
was
that
losing my mind. Go
it's
on.
down near the bottom
Yes.
of the jacket.
Yes.
Okay.
Did-
These idiots who say that it's his jacket lapel, no, that's not true. If you
No,
look
it's
at the
lower.
actual jacket, it's down near the bottom of the
Right.
jacket.
Right.
Yeah.
And then where does it go? It goes into the wrist and thigh.
Well, you're supposed to believe that it goes into the back. How could it go into the back of the wrist? Okay,
Right.
you know, and then it ricochets off somehow, and it goes into his upper left thigh. Okay, but that's not the end, though. That's not
No.
the end
No.
because it then falls out. Okay.
Yeah. Okay, but if you look at that angle, if you just took that angle by Connolly separately in a car, remove JFK, where could that? Now the bullet is going right to left, body wise.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, think about it, Paul, and
Well-
almost straight down.
Let me throw this into the mix.
Go ahead, Bubby. Go
One
ahead.
of the
Go up. And by the way,
yeah.
I'm one of the before the sixth floor museum opened.
Mm,
I was there in 1991. And
okay.
at that time, you could actually go to that window.
Mm.
All right. And I actually did go to the window. And that is a slight right to left angle.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's a right to left angle.
Yes.
Well, that does not match up with Connolly.
No, I know. But project in your imagination the far end of the rooftop of the building. That to me matches up. And I don't know if you guys ever thought about it or talked about it.
And it doesn't work for the head one, by the way. Even Lee said
Absolutely.
that, right? Because
Absolutely.
it goes in and then has to come out to the right. The other thing I want to throw into the mix
Mm.
is in the book. We were lucky enough to receive from Jeff Meek an actual.
Explain who Jeff Meek is to the people at home.
Well, Jeff Meek, I actually just got to meet this year, and he added a little addendum to Jim's book, actually, because it wasn't covered in the documentary, but we covered it in our book, and we actually show the original piece that he sent us. And what he did is he got from the daughter of one of the technicians for the FBI that did the spectrographic analysis of the clothes. Okay, so get this. This is in the report, and we have the handwritten report in the book. And if you read it, what it says is there's metallic debris on Kennedy's jacket in the back. There's metallic debris on Connolly's clothes in the back, but there's no metallic debris on the tie or the shirt collar.
Interesting.
Okay, so we asked that to be interpreted by Edwards. I forget his first name. Brian Edwards. Okay, he says, how do you interpret that?
Wait, who is Brian Edwards? Just so
Brian
you know.
was one of the witnesses we had in the movie.
Okay,
He
right.
was a
Yeah.
former police inspector for 22
Right. For who?
He's out of Lawrence, Kansas.
Okay, thank you.
So basically, he says it can't be the same bullet.
Okay.
It can't be the same bullet. So that's an added element. I mean, we don't really need it, but I mean, when you want to prove the ridiculousness of the CE399, I mean, you have so many things, and this is added into the mix.
Right. Now, I mean, what do you think 399 was? I mean, obviously, if this bullet has such a little amount removed from it, is it a bullet that is just planted, Jim, on the stretcher? Or do you think it came out of the back and flopped onto the upper cushion of the limo? I mean, it looks pristine. It looks too pristine to be either a wound or obviously Connolly. It couldn't come from Connolly. But even the back wound, it would be more damaged, I believe.
If you, one of the things I referred to in the book was the work that Gary Aguilar and Tink Thompson did on this subject, which I thought was very, very important.
This is Dr. Gary Aguilar.
Yes, out of San Francisco.
Out of San Francisco, yeah.
Yeah, and Tink Thompson, of course, wrote 6 Seconds in Dallas.
Right.
One of the very first and strongest critiques of the Warren Commission. But he's still on the case. And so Gary and Tink decided that there was a problem with a document in the Warren Commission, which I think is volume 19. All right. And it says that FBI agent Bardwell Odom took CE 399 to Tomlinson and Wright at Parkland, and they verified that this was the bullet that they found on November 22nd. And so the problem with Gary was that he said, well, Jim, why is there no field report on that interview? It says it in this Justice Department document, but I can't find the FBI field report. Those are called 302s.
302s, yeah.
And so he went to the National Archives and he searched, and then he talked to the archivist and said, is there anything missing? Is there a document missing about? And he said, no, these are all the 302s. So he takes the problem to Tink Thompson. And Tink Thompson is a private investigator today. So
now in San Francisco today.
Yeah, a little bit north of San Francisco.
Okay.
And so he has one of those machines where you can track anybody in the United States, where he lives, et cetera, that kind of thing. And so, well, why don't we talk to Bardwell Odom, the FBI agent who's supposed to have done this? And so he goes, well, can you find him? And he looks him up. He says, yeah, here he is right here. He's down there. He's down there in Texas. And so they call him up and they read this report to Bardwell Odom, who was supposed to be part of this investigation. And he goes, I never showed that bullet to anybody.
Wow. Wow.
And if I would have shown it to Wright, I sure as heck would have remembered, because we were friends. Okay, I knew OP Wright very well. So no, I didn't. I never showed that bullet to anybody. I sure as hell. And by the way, here's the clincher. I sure as hell would have written the 302 to cover my butt. Okay, on that.
Well, you cover. Yeah, go on.
The FBI lied.
Right. You cover in the movie how
that could be like drinking Perrier water, in this case.
Right. They all initial the bullet, and then the initials kind of disappear also in the chain of custody.
Okay, well that's actually kind of debatable now.
Yes.
Because that's debatable now, because now miraculously they found these initials they couldn't find before.
Oh, I didn't know that. Oh. Plot twist. Interesting. Oh my God. Well, in the movie, you and in some of this the new book, you go into the chain of custody in great detail.
Well, there is no chain of custody.
Right. I say chain of custody because that's the legal jargon. But somehow it ends up with Rowley, the head of the Secret Service, and then Rowley hands it off to who? And why?
He hands it off to the FBI agent.
Right. Okay.
And then the FBI agent supposedly takes it down to the lab. Okay, with Frazier. Well, here's the problem with that. The receipt that Rowley signed is, I believe, at 8:50.
Oh, there's a time problem.
8:50 that night.
Yeah.
Okay, so if you figure the FBI guy has to get in his car, he has to drive through traffic, he has to go into the FBI building, he has to give it to Frazier, and Frazier, has to put it in his, in his custody. You figure that would take like another half an hour.
At least.
Okay. All right. Well, here's the problem with that. The problem with that is Frazier had the stretcher bullet at 7:30, and that's right in his index. That's right in his report index. How could he get the stretcher bullet at 7:30 if it wasn't even given to the FBI till 8:50?
Well, let me ask you,
how could something like that happen?
Of course, it's impossible. But my question is, are they winging it? I mean, are they doing this on the fly, Jim? I mean, what's your instinct as to who's doing what that quickly, based in real time? Bullet, stretcher, Parkland, Wright, Tomlinson. I mean, how is this going down?
In my opinion, and I think most people who research this case believe that CE 399 was planted.
Right.
Okay. At Parkland.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, who planted it? Now that's a question, because it was never explored. That possibility was never explored.
Right.
That I don't think we're ever going to know.
Right.
But I think the FBI then went ahead and look, we're stuck with this thing.
Yeah. Yeah,
We've
yeah.
got to make the best case that we can about this CE399. So if we have to lie about Bardwell Odom, showing it to these two witnesses, let's go ahead and do that. Okay. And hopefully nobody will ever find out that the stretcher bullet was there at 7:30. And
Right.
by the way, let me say this. That gamble paid off.
Yeah.
Because this did not get discovered until the 90s.
Yes.
This whole thing about, the bullet being there an hour and 20 minutes before it should have been.
Well,
So
not
in
only
other
that,
words,
I mean, the amount of material missing from the bullet is not really an issue for many
Yes.
decades. I mean, there's a
Yeah.
lot about 399 that you guys know was not really an issue until fairly
Right.
recently. Yeah.
Right. So in my opinion, that's what happened is somebody planted CE399. The FBI decided to make the best of a bad situation.
Right.
They lied their head off.
Documentary wise,
Okay,
documenting it. Yeah.
And I believe that that document I'm talking about, the fake document from Odom to Tomlinson, right?
Mhm.
I believe the Warren Commission accepted that.
Yeah.
Okay, without checking it out themselves.
Right.
And I think that's how it got into the Warren report. Today, of course, as you know, as Paul knows, as anybody knows, C399 will not last 5 seconds.
It would be laughable. It would be laughed out of any evidentiary hearing.
Yes.
I mean, just the fact of what it looks like, where it came from, the lack of chain of custody, the ballistics. I mean, it would never even be entered in. But,
Right.
but what it would provide is rumor and innuendo as to how it got there.
Yes.
Because that's more interesting than the bullet itself to me. That
Yes.
somebody,
in other words, if you were a defense lawyer,
yeah,
you would want CE399.
yeah, absolutely. Are you kidding? Imagine if Oswald had a legitimate lawyer like Mark Lane.
Yes.
At a trial, what Mark Lane could do with a 399 in
Right.
an evidentiary hearing in the courtroom, that would be worth the price of admission to me.
Right. Right. See, somebody like Mark Lane, he's such a smart guy. He probably wouldn't have challenged it at the evidentiary hearing.
No.
He would have waited till it got into the court, and
Yeah.
then he would just destroy it.
Destroy
okay,
it.
and you might be able to get the case thrown out just on that.
On that
And
alone.
this is one of the things that we talked about in the book. At least I tried to talk about in the book. Okay, is that fraud is a reason to get a case thrown out. Okay, if you can show the judge that the prosecution is playing games, or at the worst case scenario, inventing evidence,
Yeah.
then you can move to have the case thrown out. Okay, and that's what I believe today would happen. The only way, if we want to divert the attention a little bit, that whole Bugliosi piece of crap book, which I'm one of maybe the 5 people in America who actually read the whole thing.
The whole thing, yeah.
Okay, and by the way,
by the way, this is Jim's answer to the Bugliosi 9,000 page book, which I highly recommend this answer to wasting your life reading the Bugliosi marathon encyclopedia.
Right. See, and the only way that Vince could have won that case is by not having Mark Lane there.
Right.
And so instead they gave it to this Western, guy of a Western cartoon, Jerry Spence, who didn't. And by the way, you know what Bugliosi says about this is almost incredible.
You're talking about the mock trial with Bugliosi
London.
versus Spence in London,
right.
Which I think was on Showtime.
Yes, it was.
I don't know how to remember this, but yeah, go on.
Spence is not a lightweight lawyer, though.
See,
I mean,
Bugliosi
in fairness,
yeah.
Bugliosi tries to defend this by saying he had 3 months to study.
Yeah. 90 days.
You can't master this case in 3 years.
Let alone 90 days.
Let alone 3 months. I mean, that's a joke.
Was Ruth Payne? Did she testify in that TV case?
Yeah. Ruth Payne was one of the witnesses who testified at that case. Eddie Lopez did also.
Oh, that's right. That's
Eddie
right.
Lopez was there also.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
But
I think Eddie Lopez.
I believe that. And by the way, from what I've learned, the 2 people who were responsible for that getting on and scripting some of it were Summers and Hoke.
Oh.
I got that from Paul Hoke because I learned.
It's about Summers from England.
Yeah.
Anthony Summers, Tony Summers. Okay.
Yeah. So and I talked because I discovered this in Bugliosi's book
Mm-hmm.
that Hoke was involved with
Now,
script.
explain who Hoke is for people at home?
Paul Hoke is he lives up in Berkeley,
Mm-hmm.
and he had been a first generation researcher.
Yeah.
Who was pro conspiracy. He's completely flipped now over.
Right. Now, didn't the guy who ran the school book depository flip the museum? Gary Mack?
Oh, Gary Mack. Yeah, he's passed away. But
Right.
yes, he's another guy who flipped sides.
Okay. I just want to have a list of guys who flipped sides at one point. That would be my favorite list.
So when I discovered this in Bugliosi's book, I either emailed or talked to Paul, and he said, well, Jim, Summers actually did more of that than I did.
Wow.
Okay. And so that's how I found out that Summers was the other guy who was involved in this.
Anthony Summers is the author of the Conspiracy that Jim's referring to.
But he changed the title.
He's changed the title too.
Yeah, now it's called Not in Your Lifetime.
Oh, Not in Your Lifetime. Thank you.
Yeah.
I have both of those, but it's essentially the same book.
All right. So it's why you would have ever agreed to have Jerry Spence as a defense lawyer in that case really eludes me. When you had people like Lane and Tannenbaum you could pick from.
Tannenbaum would have been a great choice.
Yeah, well, Tannenbaum would have blown up Bugliosi.
Yeah, that would have been dangerous. That would have been dangerous. But that was also on Showtime now that I think about it.
Yes. But
very
they also did the King one.
Oh, that's right.
Which I heard wasn't bad.
I haven't seen that. I don't remember that, or I haven't seen. Yeah. Oh, I remember. Yeah.
Judge didn't have the Judge Joe Brown.
Joe Brown was the judge.
Yeah, I think he was one of the witnesses.
Oh, he was a witness.
Yeah.
All right.
He was a witness.
Right.
Okay.
So let's talk about Chapter 10, Paul, with 60 years of obstruction of justice, just so we can.
By the way, if I can just interject something.
Yeah, go on.
The book is worth buying for that chapter.
The book of
Chokeholds, JFK Assassination.
Oh yeah. That's why I was jumping to that chapter.
Buying for that.
Yeah. There's all kinds of documents in here. Also, that's a great chapter. That's why I was mentioning 60 years of obstruction of justice is really coming full circle to where we are now with the Biden administration and the FOIA request that Jim was talking about at the opening of the show.
Well, yeah, that's look, just to give you an idea of how much obstruction of justice there was through 60 years. That chapter's 90 pages.
That's right. Yeah.
And we could have added 50 pages.
Right.
And look, it's every investigation. It starts off, we start off with the Warren Commission and how it was formed and how Warren was intimidated and how they set the tone right from the get-go that they had to go the low nut route. And then we get into, the type of questions asked and not asked and how they give weight to lousy witnesses and no weight to great witnesses. I mean, it's just the worst. Think of this. You have the most important murder of the last century with the worst autopsy.
Well, that's a given. One of my favorites in here is which we all knew about before, but the Carl Bernstein's 1977 Rolling Stone article.
Oh, yeah,
which is not fully in there, but you highlight the article itself.
Oh, yeah. Well, what we do is we go with primary. We provide an awful lot of links for people to be able to go right to
the source,
a website and the source to read the whole article. They're encouraged to do so. But you take the Rockefeller Commission. Mm-hmm. And you think of some of the things that happened there. I'm not sure how many people knew that Henry Kissinger told Balin, who was the, part of that Ford assigned to take charge of the Rockefeller Commission, right? Mm-hmm. And he wants to hold a press conference. And Kissinger says, no, you're not holding a press conference. And who comes out to sanitize the Rockefeller Commission report? No other than Dick Cheney. I mean, we're seeing all these people coming in, and then you move along to the House Select Committee on
Dick Cheney, right? Here it is, page 373. in the book Chokeholds. This is all thoroughly footnoted.
It's incredible. I mean, the things people, when they will read that, you see, Sylvia Marr did a heck of a job on the Warren Commission for her time.
Right.
She showed how that would, but what Chokeholds does is it takes 60 years of this stuff. So we go through all the investigations, and people will be astounded how, sometimes they'll bring in the press. I mean, the Garrison investigation. I think nobody wrote better about how, that than Jim and William Davey and everything, but how they brought in hitmen from the price. And when I say hitmen, is people who would destroy Garrison's reputation.
Oh, you could mention Walter Sheridan at this point, and the White
Sheridan,
paper,
Ainsworth, Felon, you name it.
who worked for Robert Kennedy. Robert Kennedy Jr. said that Walter Sheridan was a revered member of the family, almost.
But at the time, he was working for NBC.
Well,
and we have the documentation that the okay for that came from New York City, out of NBC headquarters.
Right. Okay. Jim's referring to the 1967 white paper, essentially written by Walter Sheridan for NBC News.
Yeah, Walter Sheridan and Rick Townley were the two main reporters on that. But what Paul's talking about here is, and this is what's so astonishing, is that this goes on till today.
Yeah.
If Oswald had shot Kennedy and it was an open and shut case, why on earth would you still be covering this thing up?
Well, you see, you go to the ARB, right? And this was, we refer to the documentary, and you hear someone like Samoluk, who was, one of the people, one of the investigators for the ARB. And what does he tell us? He tells us that the Secret Service went into shred mode, about Kennedy's travels and motorcades.
Oh, yeah.
They go into shredding mode. They destroy all those files. And what would you have found in those files? Likely information about prior plots.
Well, speaking of prior plots, could you address this thing, which I never knew about, the plot in Nashville, Tennessee, Paul?
Yeah.
Or Jim, I never heard about this plot. A guy with a gun. He lands in a helicopter and he's approached by someone in a gun covered with a bag or something.
Well, the point that there's not much to be revealed about it in this sense. I mean, that comes from Governor Clement.
From the governor himself of Tennessee.
Yeah, he's the one who leaked it to the press or informed the press. And the Secret Service didn't want this coming out. But they arrested a guy who had a gun under a sack who was approaching Kennedy. Mm-hmm. But we don't know who this person is.
Right. This is in the summer of 63 or...
that's...
when was...
That one, I'm thinking...
April of 63 or something?
Yeah, I'm thinking April 63.
April, yeah.
We have stuff, you see, we have stuff going back to a year earlier in Springfield, where two, I think they were brothers-in-law, young guys, and they're pointing a gun in Springfield at Kennedy during a motorcade. They're picked up.
Wow.
Okay. And they're questioned. We don't know. Apparently they're still alive, but we don't know who these people are. And they let them go because they said, well, they didn't shoot, they didn't.
Right.
But the point is there were many threats before Dallas that were coming from possible shooters from tall buildings. And that we could talk about into Chicago. You could
the Thomas Arthur Valley plot in Chicago.
Arthur Valley, there was threats. Look, Miltier's threat was just about that, right? The Miltier threat was a high-powered rifle from a tall building.
Yeah.
And that was never taken into the account in the security in Dallas.
Let me ask you something. I think I remember this, that O&I destroyed all their documents, Jim, when they came to testify.
Oh, that's a fascinating story, Jim.
Right. Can you guys address that? I vaguely remember O&I telling them to go fuck themselves. We destroyed everything.
Well, it's worse than that, right?
Okay.
Jim, you know which one we're talking about? What's the name of the lady who was the liaison for the O&I?
Yes.
Okay, she was doing her work.
Okay.
And she was providing the information on a timely matter. The ARB loved her.
Yeah.
They loved her so much they had to get rid of her. And that's what O&I did, is they totally derailed this lady's career and removed her from her task. And they're saying, hey, you know what? we're giving them information about from the ONI that we have in our office here. What the heck are you doing going around the country trying to get ONI information? So she was being thorough.
Right.
So they said, no, you're being too helpful in a way. So many words, right? So this lady, what was her name, Jim? Do you remember?
I can't remember her name right now. No, but
don't remember. But it's a tragic story, and so you have that, and then the ARB also said that, boy, were the CIA and the FBI dragging their feet, when we were trying to ask for stuff. So that goes back to our last chapter, right? So we take it from the Warren Commission all the way to what Jim talked about before about Trump and Biden.
And Biden, yeah.
So it's really, and when we say 60 years, it's wall to wall.
Yeah.
Wall to wall. Every single investigation. You talked about, Operation Mockingbird. And, there's a heck of a lot that was written about how the press was aligned, to help out and toe the line.
Well, there's a great letter I have from Alex Gibney's father at Newsweek, writing to Dulles saying, I can't take it anymore. You got to get me off this assignment. And Dulles says, we'll have lunch. We'll talk about it when you come to D.C. Gibney's father was a deep operative in Operation Mockingbird, working at a Newsweek for many years.
As was one of the key people from the get-go was a Hal Hendricks. He was the go-to guy from JM Wave, and he's he's the one who leaked all the information. The whole Oswald.
Well, I'm talking about the guys who were embedded at mainstream publications that Bernstein refers to. One of them was Alex Gibney's father at Newsweek, which is they were everywhere. Obviously, New York Times had them. Everybody had them in Mockingbird.
Well, a little background. See, at that time that he published that article, Bernstein published it in Rolling Stone.
Right.
The reason he did that is because when George Bush, this is what happened. They didn't like the fact that Colby was revealing so much information.
The family jewels, you're referring
to the Church Committee.
To the Church Committee, Frank Church out of Idaho.
So they decided, we got to put a cap on this.
Mm-hmm.
All right. And so Bush comes in. All right. And he manages to save what they thought were their most important aspects of the CIA. And one of them was Mockingbird.
Yeah.
Okay. And so the Church Committee, if you take a look in the Church Committee, there's like maybe 3 or 4 pages on the CIA and the media. And so Bernstein heard about this, that the Church Committee had a lot more stuff than they were revealing. And so that's what he did. He talked to some of the staffers, and that's how he put together that milestone article. And by the way, when I say milestone, that really was a milestone.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. In the whole history of the CIA and the media.
Yeah.
That was seminal.
I mean, it's got details up the kazoo. It's in a mainstream publication like Rolling Stone. It's still available. You have footnotes in the book in Chokeholds, the JFK Assassination, which people can purchase on Amazon and look these things up themselves. It's slightly off the topic, but getting into the Assassinations Record Review Board, we were doing a recent story on, we covered Lansdale, and we just did a show on the film itself, on JFK's film. I read this document that Eric found.
Are you talking about Oliver Stone's movie?
Yeah, we just did an episode about Oliver Stone's movie yesterday. Okay,
the 1991 one.
The 1991 one, but we also the week before, or 2 weeks before, we did one on Lansdale.
All right,
and I started to go down this rabbit hole on Fletcher Prouty, and what we discovered was this interview with him with the Assassination Record Review Board, where they just completely shred the guy, Jim. I mean, it's embarrassing to read. I mean, he's dismantled by the review board. And
you didn't read my article?
I read your article on that. I read it. That's why I wanted you to comment, because people at home have not read your article, Jim. That's where I was going with this.
All right. Okay. Look, Prouty, when he was called in by the ARB.
Yeah.
All right. The first couple because there were a couple of ringers on the committee. who, by the way, resigned, left the committee within months of that interview. All right. And so what Fletcher did, he said, from the first couple of questions, I knew what these guys were onto, because he had experienced the same thing before when he went into the House Select Committee for an interview, and he was one of the very few people who knew who Joanides was at that time. And so he decided, I'm not going to do a full interview. I'm just going to do a pre-interview, and I'm going to leave. All right. And so he called up Leno Sanek that day.
Leno Sanek being
the host of Black Op Radio, who's the keeper of Fletcher Prouty's archive.
Right.
Okay. And so he called up Leno Sanek that day, and he said, Len, you should have seen this thing. These guys were rabid Warren Commission guys, who were trying to discredit me. And so I just played along with it, okay, giving them what I thought that they would want and get out of there. All right. And so one of the things they were trying to do was, it's really funny, because if you read the interview, they didn't touch the Vietnam angle, which is the important thing that Fletcher gave to Oliver. And to this day, if you talk to Oliver, he'll say, well, Newman came in later, but it was Fletcher who gave me the initial information.
Right.
But the other thing that they wanted to zero in on was the whole thing about the San Antonio military intelligence detail, which is another thing he gave to Oliver.
The 112th military.
Right. Okay. And so Fletcher ended up not revealing everything he knew about that, because when and this is what makes it kind of funny, because when Len went to his house, he said he didn't have any documents on this. That's what he told him. When Len went to his house, he saw a notepad there right out in the open. And it was information that Fletcher was getting about the 112th not being able to go to Dallas that day. Okay. And he says, Fletcher, what is this? He goes, oh, someone called me up, and gave me information about this whole 112th thing. And you wrote it down on this tablet and you left it there. Okay. And so it turned out that what Fletcher was saying was essentially correct. And in fact, somebody called, and I can't reveal her name because she works for the government.
You can't. You're saying you can't.
I know. I can't reveal her name because she works for the government. Len told me about it.
Right.
Okay. And so she called up Len after she saw the movie. And she goes, that thing about the 112th?
Mm-hmm.
That's true. My father was a part of it. Okay. And the day after the assassination, there was a meeting in the kitchen. And I heard people yelling about not reporting, to Dallas when they should have. Okay.
So who do you think called them?
That's a hell of a good question.
We only got 5 minutes left of the show, so maybe we can focus on some of this in the last couple of minutes, Jimmy.
So what I did, and because Larry Hancock also did some research on this.
Larry Hancock, the author of
Somebody Would Have Talked.
Somebody Would Have Talked. Okay.
Right. Okay.
Which is a great book, by the way.
He found another witness who said that that's what happened.
Mm-hmm.
So and this is one of my objections to the review board, which I've had for a very long time and which I more or less kept to myself.
Right.
Okay.
Which I haven't heard you talk about this. That's
no, because I think it's time, because Thunheim, who I thought was a pretty fair guy, every time he talks to the media now, and by the way, he's the only one left.
Yeah, I know.
The other four have passed on.
This is Judge Thunheim, or former judge.
In Minnesota.
In Minnesota. Just for the people at home. Yeah.
Every time he talks to the media, he supports the Warren Commission.
I know, it's getting crazy.
And I in my opinion, he shouldn't be doing that.
Right.
He should be like right down the middle. He should be objective. He should be neutral. But not only him, but all four of the other ones, and Marwell. Morrow was the first executive director. He was a pro-Warren. And if you read Doug Horn's book,
I wanted to ask you about Doug Horn for a second, because he interviews the CIA guy about the alteration of the Zapruder film. And I know you don't believe that film was altered, So,
Wait, Mark, let's
Go on.
not put words in my mouth.
I'm just baiting you, Jimmy.
Don't
I'm
say
baiting
that.
you.
I know you don't believe this. Okay.
I'm teasing you. Go on.
I hope so. I hope
Yeah,
so.
go on about what you think.
I'm the preferred word is I'm an agnostic.
Oh,
I'm an
get out of
agnostic
here. Get out. Give me a
Okay?
break. Okay.
I don't believe it and I don't disbelieve it.
Okay.
I'm on the fence.
You're not even skeptical?
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, okay. To give Doug his due,
Yeah.
I don't know if you've ever interviewed Sidney Wilkinson.
No.
Yeah, Sidney Wilkinson is an editor in the movie business, and her husband have done some it's the most credible work I've ever seen on the Zapruder film. And if what they have is genuine, and there's still a question about it because they can't find the first generation transparencies. Okay, if they have is genuine, then there is a genuine question about what happened to the Zapruder film.
Okay,
Right.
Oliver is
that's as far as I'll go.
Okay, well, Oliver is very emphatic about what he purchased from Time Life was an untouched copy of the Zapruder film.
Okay,
I mean, I don't know how he does it, or rectifies it or explains it, but he's emphatic in interviews where I've heard Oliver talk about the film that he got in 1991.
Well, okay, between me and you and the 80,000 people who are going to see this, okay. Sidney Wilkinson made a presentation.
Okay,
to Oliver.
Okay,
and this is when we were working on JFK Revisited.
Right.
All right, and I was there.
Okay.
When in the office that day, and he didn't, for whatever reason. Not only didn't he buy it, he wouldn't entertain it either.
Yeah.
You know, see, the thing is, I looked at myself on that film.
Yeah.
Is if he asked me a question, then I would do my best to answer the question.
Right. Right.
But if he didn't ask me the question, I wasn't going to interject myself because, you know, I learned while working on that movie, and I know you learned this a long time ago, you know, if you're a writer, you might as well be a custodian.
Yeah.
Okay.
No, I agree.
Writers have little or no power over what gets into the final cut of the movie.
I agree.
All right. And so that's the way I acted on that film. I tend to believe I'm a little bit more convinced that if Sidney Wilkinson is correct, okay, and that's a big if, okay, then there's something wrong with that film.
Okay. That is a big if, so we're going to have to leave it at that.
Yeah.
But let me ask you about something, because I didn't know this. Robert, in his new book, has the Rowley memo, which I thought was thoroughly debunked a number of years ago, but he features that as part of his recent book that he's come out with. I was wondering if you had any comment about that.
If I have a pained expression on my face,
I had a pained expression when I looked.
Jim has gas.
No.
Okay.
Oh my Lord.
Okay. If I have a pained expression on my face,
yeah, I felt the same way. I just wanted to put that out there.
I think Bob is wrong about that.
Thank you.
I don't think the Rowley memorandum is isn't the Rowley McCone?
Yes, Rowley McCone.
Well, McCone memo, right?
McCone memo. I remember because when I was working with Oliver on my Oswald project, I pulled that out, not knowing anything. This was 10 years ago. And he just he went savage on my ass, Oliver.
Oh, really?
Oh, my God. He found out, I didn't know. I had uncovered it briefly and I showed it to him. I said, we should use this as some sort of research material. And he didn't know either. And then he found out about it and I didn't know either. And he went ballistic on my ass, Oliver, over that month.
You probably read what I wrote about it.
Yeah, probably. Probably. All right. So we're at 2 hours now. We're going to have to, at some point end this madness and plug the books and do another show with you guys. But the people at home, Chokeholds, if you could buy a book this year, this is the 60th anniversary. It's still going on. Paul's now walking out of the show for some reason.
No. I'm just thinking. I'm getting a plug.
He's getting something. I don't know what
he's out of power. We're going to wrap it up.
I'm out of power, but I'll have some right away. Sorry, guys.
This is the book you should get if you want to stay up to date with the current, and I mean current, because this covers the Paul Landis discovery of 399 allegedly, and also the Trump and Biden involvement in the suppression of recent documentation that's left behind. This is so up to date, this book. I really strongly recommend it for our audience, and I think you could probably get it on Amazon. It's,
you can. You can get it on a number of
platforms.
Okay, Mark, thank you so much, and I'll mail you the check.
No, stop it. Would you stop? But also, if you can get a hold of this one, which wait a second, somebody wrote a thing in my copy, Jim.
It's probably me.
Yeah, I think it says Jim. Yeah, I strongly recommend this book, and it's a companion piece to the JFK Revisited DVD, which is fantastic. It'll go over things that we were talking about that people at home have no idea what we were just talking about for 2 hours. Take a look at this in its complete 4-hour context, because it'll get into the chain of custody and a bunch of other things that we were discussing.
Yes, Mark, if I may add to that book, because I read it, the second half has interviews of people that goes way more into depth that we could have. And it's a gold mine of information. So I did a book review on that, and I thought it was mostly just about the transcripts of the movie. No, it goes way further than that.
Right, and you want to get back to the original gangster right here, my friend. The Assassinations by Paul
gangster,
the original gangster, Lisa Pease and Jane, and with an introduction by Judge Joe Brown.
About that book? Can I
just go ahead
about that book?
Go ahead.
All right, as you probably know, that book was like 2003.
Yeah.
Finally, 20 years later, somebody took that idea, Libby Handros and John Kirby, and have made it into a multi-streaming part series.
Wow.
For Who Dared, I think is the name of it.
Oh, right. They screened
it.
Right. Yeah. Didn't they screen it at the conference?
Yes, they did at the Kappa conference.
I remember seeing parts of it, yes.
Now, if you can get it on Amazon and some other ones, it only took 20 years for somebody to get that idea about doing all four assassinations.
All four assassinations together. Wow. So give us a plug as to where they can find your website, Jim.
The website is called kennedysandking.com. Okay, and you can just go ahead and plug that into Google or any kind of search mechanism.
I will have links to everything in the description.
Oh, you will? Okay.
Yes, absolutely. We'll put all the links there. Paul, where can they find you or your work, your articles on Kennedy and some of your French cooking recipes?
Thank you.
Thank you.
So, guys, we have jfkchokeholds.com.
Right on.
Gives information. That can link you. I would... if you guys, if they go there, they'll see how they can connect with us on Facebook.
Oh, good.
We're adding all sorts of information all the time.
Right on.
My articles, I write exclusively for Kennedys and King so far.
For Jim's website. Okay.
Jim's website. And I'm working on an article right now on something that Jim doesn't know about. But
very good, my friend. Very good. Well, we're going to have you back because we ran out of time. It's only 2 hours. It's not enough to discuss some of the spin-off things that I wanted to talk to you guys about. But I just wanted to do a show plugging the hell out of these books because this is really what I'm interested in is the books themselves because you guys are the original gangsters of research in this area. And I'm just a piker who feeds off of the belly of your work and tries to turn it into a show with Eric every Tuesday and Friday on America's Untold Stories.
No, you know a lot too.
I learned from you guys. I don't know everything I know I've learned from books, and I need these books to feed my addiction. So I wanted to thank you guys for both showing up, and if you could just stay for a couple of minutes afterwards, we'll say our goodbyes.
Are you going to give us a drink?